you. Let me just make sure we're rolling. All right, go ahead.
Okay, Dana Abercrombie, The Coalition. This show is so interesting. I love
Thanks.
the different dynamics and the characters that are created. But one of the things that was interesting for it is the stop motion animation, but the interviews are also kind of they're live action. These are human, real world. Can you talk about the reason behind combining that?
Sure. Brandon, do you want to take
Sure,
this one?
yeah. So one thing is that live action is much faster to do. So videotaping the guests is much faster. If we had tried to animate them, it would have taken the show another 5 years to make. But we also just like love these guests and want to see their real human faces and expressions reacting in real time to what Lauren is asking of them. And we think the stop motion plays sort of well with the live action because even though it's animated, it is real. There is a real puppet in a real space. It's just shrunk down. And so hopefully as you're watching it, you're able to sort of suspend disbelief and start to think of them both as real people. So you're going to look at Jonathan Van Ness and he's a real person. And then you go to Lauren and it hopefully will start to feel like, oh, I think they're both real people having a genuine conversation.
I would also say for that, like, I think everyone is understandably so self-protective, especially in media environments. There's people get their talking points and they hold on to them like life preservers, And we felt like if people are talking to a stop motion NPR host puppet for an hour, that's weird enough and unfamiliar enough that just by necessity, they're going to end up sort of unclenching from those talking points and venturing into more undiscovered territory, parts of themselves that maybe we haven't seen before, funny stuff that they might not feel comfortable doing if it's just an interview with me, for example. And also, we wanted to talk about stuff that could be kind of uncomfortable or incendiary. And I think that's another thing that can make especially famous people clench up where they're like, oh God, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to get in trouble. But if it's a stop motion NPR puppet, it feels a little less threatening because the whole thing feels a little more absurd. So part of it is we wanted to allow new aspects of our guests to sort of frack up to the surface.
And it comes across effortlessly because I genuinely thought that is this ad lib? Because you see the reactions that's going on. So it works wonderfully.
Thank you.
Zach. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So for you, Zach, Lauren is the third most popular host of NPR on the show. He seems to be truly kind of unlikable, but at the same time, really charismatic. And he doesn't really listen to his guests. Can you talk about walking that fine balance? And also, why do you think he's so popular, even though he's not really listening?
Well, I think third most popular is maybe an inauspicious. I feel like he's like probably hovering on the brink of cancellation at any given moment. But I think for Lauren, I think Lauren is like so many people I know, views his life as performance, views his life about a lot of his life is spent trying to manage the way people experience him, to try to create the impression of him in their eyes that he wants them to have of him. And that doesn't really usually go well because it's manipulative and it's insecure and it's codependent and nutty. But a lot of people, I think, do that. We are just trying, instead of just accepting yourself as best you can and being yourself, you're trying to kind of be liked or be admired or be intimidating or whatever it is. So I think that's an epidemic problem that probably all of us have experienced at one time or another. And Lauren is a terminal case, possibly. But the other thing I would say about Lauren is that I think he's deeply lonely and he just wants to connect and he wants to be, and it comes out in all these kind of obnoxious ways, but basically he just wants to feel like he's in a flow with a person, like someone gets him and he gets someone. And I think that's another very relatable thing is feeling like, oh gosh, I just want to be included. I just want to be known. I just want to be celebrated. I think those are all very human needs and yearnings that in Lauren's case are amplified to a kind of like screeching volume.
So I was wondering, who is Lauren without Bob? Because they kind of need each other.
That's a great question.
Definitely. The show for sure would not be able to exist. It would have been canceled even earlier if Barb wasn't there to manage all the practicalities and to really personally manage Lauren. And we talked to Elise Hu, who's a host at NPR, and she gave us all this great information about the world of NPR. And I don't think it's uncommon for producers to almost become like the parents of hosts, where they're like, have you had your snack? Did you get enough sleep? Are you feeling good about yourself today? Because we need you. It's like actors, right? Where it's like you need to feel confident and sort of taken care of to do your best job. And Barb's such a sweet person. She genuinely, I think, thinks Lauren is good at his job and that the show is good. And she's happy to be a part of that in a very humble way.
What is that old? It's like an old quote. They were like, behind every great man is a woman, or I think it's like behind every massive ego is a caretaker. I remember hearing someone say, like, in every relationship, there's the rose and there's the gardener, and Barb is such a gardener, and Lauren is such a delicate rose. Something we've talked about in the room with the writers' room and stuff is that when my mother was approaching retirement age, she said this thing about how as you get older, you can start to become a little bit invisible, where people will look through you or past you and they don't necessarily register you in the same way. And there's a kind of brutal paradox to that, because at that moment, you've had the most life experience. You've had these adventures. You have the wisdom of your past experiences. You know yourself better than you ever have before. And yet at that moment in your life, the sort of societal messaging is like, get out of the way, stand in the corner, don't take up too much space. And I think Barb for us was one of these characters who kind of tragically, in a way, shrinks herself. It's horrible. It's both generous and beautiful and loving, and it's also kind of a horrible act of self-mutilation, because she's this big, beautiful woman who has all of this colorful interior life and all this stuff to offer, and she just kind of stays out of the spotlight and doesn't take up too much room. And so that's why episode what is it, Brandon, 4, I guess, when she gets to go chair shopping and she has this kind of personal fantasia where she discovers aspects of herself she's never known, is one of our favorite episodes, because the person who's behind this giant ego finally gets to step into the sunlight for a moment and discover some things about herself instead of just catering to Lauren's endless list of demands.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for speaking to me. I love the show. I love everything about it.
Thank you.
Dana.
Thank you for
That's so
talking
nice.
to us.
Thank you, Dana. I'll move you back to the press room.
Okay.
All right, guys, we're